I checked my reflection in the mirrored wall backstage at the Tech Future conference. 8 years ago, I couldn't afford a decent haircut. Now my tailored suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The cool air conditioning raised goosebumps on my neck as I scrolled through my presentation notes one last time on my tablet. 20,000 people waited in the main hall. CEOs, venture capitalists, tech journalists, all eager to hear what Alexander Chen, founder and CEO of Neuralink Technologies, had to say about the future of AI integration. My company's valuation had just hit $50 billion. My personal net worth was approaching $20 billion. Not bad for a kid whose family had stolen his college fund. Mr. Chen, my assistant Eliza appeared at my elbow, her normally composed expression slightly strained. There are 3 people in the VIP waiting area claiming to be your family. They're quite insistent on seeing you before your speech. My stomach tightened. I'd wondered when this day would come. They say they're your parents and brother, Eliza continued. Security asked for my authorization before letting them through. I told them I'd need to check with you first. I moved to the small window in the backstage door. There they were, 8 years older, but unmistakable. My father, Richard Chen, his hair now more gray than black, wearing a suit that had probably been purchased for this specific occasion. My mother, Linda, her face carefully made up, clutching her designer handbag, fake, I was certain. And my brother, Greg, slightly heavier than I remembered, shifting uncomfortably in dress shoes he wasn't used to wearing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. 5 minutes until you're on, Mr. Chen, the stage manager called out. I glanced at my phone and felt a flash of cold anger wash over me. So proud of you, son. We're here to surprise you. Your father has a business proposition to discuss after your talk. Love, Mom. I remembered another day, 8 years earlier. Sitting at our kitchen table, my acceptance letter to MIT in my hands, my parents looking anywhere but at me. We've decided to invest your college fund in a more immediate family need, my father had said. Greg needs a house for his new family, my mother had added. With the baby coming, they can't keep living in that awful apartment. But what about MIT? I'd asked, my voice barely a whisper. Orientation starts in 3 weeks. You're smart, my father had said dismissively. You'll get scholarships. Greg needs this more than you do right now. 2 days later, I'd left home with nothing but a backpack containing my laptop, some clothes, and $237 in cash. I hadn't spoken to any of them since. Until now. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and turned to Eliza. Please inform them that I'm in final preparations and can't be disturbed. Security can escort them to reserved seats in the 3rd row if they wish to watch the presentation. Should I tell them you'll meet with them afterward? She asked. I paused, considering. Tell them my schedule will determine availability after the talk. She nodded, understanding the deliberate ambiguity, and headed toward the waiting area. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, and stepped onto the stage as my name was announced. The lights were blinding, the applause thunderous. 20,000 people rose to their feet. And somewhere in the 3rd row sat the family that had thrown me away when I needed them most. Thank you, I said into the microphone, my voice echoing through the massive convention center. The reception to Neuralink's advances this year has been overwhelming. I launched into my presentation, the massive screens behind me displaying our latest neural interface technology. Out in the audience, financial journalists frantically typed notes as I revealed quarterly earnings that had exceeded Wall Street projections by over 300%. Our adaptive learning algorithms have finally crossed the threshold from programmed intelligence to true cognitive adaptation, I explained, demonstrating our system's ability to interpret complex human intentions from minimal neural input. As my eyes adjusted to the stage lighting, I could make out faces in the crowd. There they were, Third row, center, exactly where security would have placed them. My father leaned forward intently. My mother smiled proudly, as if she had any right to feel pride in my accomplishments. Greg's expression had soured as I outlined our expansion plans. Neuralink will be extending our technology into medical diagnostic systems next quarter, I announced, watching Greg's face fall further. His failed startup had attempted something similar 3 years ago, though I doubted he knew I was aware of that. I continued through my presentation, unveiling breakthroughs that had my team working around the clock for months. The audience gasped at the right moments, applauded at others. I was in control here. This was my world now. And finally, I said, as I approached the end of my prepared remarks, I'm pleased to announce that as of this morning, Neuralink Technologies has been valued at just over $50 billion, making it the fastest-growing tech company in history. Another round of applause. I caught my father nudging my mother, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. Not pride in his son's achievement. No, I recognized that look. It was the same expression he'd worn when eyeing a particularly profitable real estate deal. Dollar signs, not fatherly love. The moderator joined me on stage for the Q&A portion. After fielding questions about technical specifications and market projections, she asked the question I knew was coming. Alex, you've become something of a legend in Silicon Valley, a college dropout who built a tech empire from nothing. What would you say was the key to your success? I looked directly at the third row. Necessity, I answered. When you have absolutely nothing and no one to fall back on, failure isn't an option. You either succeed or you disappear. I saw my mother's smile falter. Good. Well, you've certainly succeeded beyond what most people could imagine, the moderator replied. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. As I exited the stage to another standing ovation, I knew what would happen next. They wouldn't wait for me to contact them. They never could resist grabbing for what they wanted. After the presentation, I moved to a cordoned-off area where journalists and investors waited for one-on-one moments. Security kept the line moving smoothly, with Eliza determining who got access and for how long. I was finishing an interview with the Wall Street Journal when my security lead, Jackson, approached. Sir, there's a situation at the perimeter, he said quietly. 3 individuals claiming to be your family are trying to access the VIP section. They're showing security personnel family photos as proof of relationship. Should I have them removed from the premises? I considered for a moment. No. Let them continue trying for another 5 minutes, then allow them through as I'm wrapping up my final interview. I want to see how they approach this. Jackson nodded and returned to his post. I turned my attention back to the reporter, discussing how Neuralink was changing the landscape of human-computer interaction. But part of my mind remained fixed on the family members trying to force their way back into my life now that I was worth billions. As predicted, just as I was concluding my final scheduled interview, I spotted them pushing through the security line. My mother reached me first, arms outstretched, tears already forming. "Alex, my brilliant boy!" she cried, embracing me while cameras flashed around us. She was playing to the audience, her voice deliberately loud enough for nearby journalists to hear. "We are so proud of you. What an amazing presentation." I stood stiffly in her embrace, neither returning it nor pushing her away. My father approached next, clapping me on the shoulder as if we'd parted on good terms last week, instead of 8 years ago after he'd stolen my future. "Son," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. "You were incredible up there. Absolutely incredible." Greg hung back slightly, offering an awkward wave. "Hey, little brother, long time no see." I looked at them, these familiar strangers wearing my family's faces. "How did you get in here?" I asked quietly. My mother's smile faltered only slightly. "What do you mean, darling? We're your parents. We wanted to surprise you on your big day." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Is that any way to greet your parents after all these years? We have so much to catch up on." A nearby journalist was watching our interaction with interest. I maintained my public composure, something I'd learned during countless investor meetings and press conferences. "This isn't the appropriate venue for a family reunion," I said, my voice neutral but firm. "We're staying at the conference hotel," Greg interjected. "The Grand Hyatt. Maybe we could have dinner tonight, reconnect as a family?" I noted how carefully they'd orchestrated this, approaching me in public where a scene would generate unwanted headlines, staying at one of the most expensive hotels in the city to create the impression of success, using words like reconnect as if we'd simply drifted apart instead of them having thrown me out. "Fine," I said finally. 8 o'clock. The private dining room at Lumiere in the hotel. My assistant will make the arrangements." Relief washed over their faces, followed quickly by triumph. They thought they'd won. "That sounds perfect, darling," my mother gushed. "We have so much to tell you." "And I'm sure you have so much to tell us," my father added meaningfully. Jackson appeared at my side. "Mr. Chen, your next appointment is waiting." "If you'll excuse me," I said, nodding to my family. "I have commitments." As security escorted them out, I heard Greg say to my mother, "See, I told you he wouldn't make a scene. He needs to maintain his image now." If only they knew that the image I maintained had nothing to do with them, and everything to do with the long game I was about to play. 2 hours later, I stepped into my penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, loosening my tie as the door closed behind me. The suite offered panoramic views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, but I barely noticed the golden sunset illuminating the skyline. "So, how bad was it?" Marcus asked, rising from the sofa where he'd been working on his laptop. My best friend since college and now my company's COO, Marcus was the only person who knew the full story of my family history. I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey from the bar and took a long sip before answering. "They showed up, after 8 years of nothing," I said, staring out at the city below. "Not a call, not a message, not even when we made the cover of Time last year. But apparently $50 billion is the magic number that makes me worth acknowledging." "Damn," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Though I can't say I'm surprised. What did they want?" "They haven't gotten to that part yet," I replied. "But they will at dinner tonight. My father mentioned a business proposition. 8 years ago, he called my startup plans a waste of time and my code playing games. Now, I'm guessing he has an amazing investment opportunity that only requires a few million to get off the ground." Marcus snorted. "Funny how that works." He'd been there the night I showed up at his apartment after being told my college fund was gone. He'd given me a spare room while I worked 3 jobs and coded our first app through the night on a second-hand laptop. I sat heavily on the sofa, suddenly exhausted, despite the adrenaline still coursing through me from the presentation. "They looked exactly the same, Marcus. Just older. Mom still with that fake smile. Dad still calculating the value of everything and everyone. Greg still riding their favoritism." "And how did you feel, seeing them?" Marcus asked quietly. I considered the question. Oddly calm, like I was observing strangers who happened to look familiar. I took another sip of whiskey. I thought I'd feel rage or pain, but instead there was just nothing. They're not important anymore. My phone buzzed with a series of incoming texts. I glanced down to see messages from all 3 family members expressing excitement about dinner and how much they were looking forward to catching up on lost time. Marcus read the messages over my shoulder and raised an eyebrow. "You're actually going to have dinner with them?" "Oh, yes," I said, a cold determination hardening my features. They don't realize it yet, but they've just given me the opportunity I've been waiting for. Which is... I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd built my empire from nothing after they'd taken everything from me. Closure, I said simply. On my terms, not theirs. The city lights began to flicker on as dusk descended, mirroring the calculated plan forming in my mind. They thought they were setting a trap for me, but they had no idea they were walking straight into mine. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., my usual time regardless of time zone or circumstance. For a moment, as sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my hotel suite, I felt disoriented. The king-sized bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets was a far cry from the lumpy futon in Marcus's spare room, where I'd spent 6 months after my family had thrown me out. I padded barefoot across the heated marble floor to the suite's kitchen. As I waited for the high-end coffee machine to brew my espresso, memories flooded back unbidden. "Alex, stop wasting time on that computer and help your brother move these boxes!" My father's voice, irritated as always when he found me coding. I'd been 16 then, working on a rudimentary version of what would eventually become Neuralink's core algorithm. Dad had barged into my room without knocking, as usual. "This isn't wasting time," I'd tried to explain. "I'm working on a neural network that could—" "Playing games is what you're doing," he'd interrupted. "Meanwhile, your brother is preparing for a real career. He's got an internship at Thompson Financial this summer. What do you have? Bloodshot eyes and bad posture." The coffee machine beeped, bringing me back to the present. I took my espresso to the window and looked out at the city skyline, remembering more. My mother hadn't been any better. "Alex, honey, why can't you be more like Greg? He's so focused, so practical." This while Greg maintained a solid C average in his business classes, partied 4 nights a week, and had never held a job that wasn't in Dad's construction company. Meanwhile, I was maintaining a 4.0 GPA, working part-time at the local computer store, and teaching myself advanced programming languages that weren't even offered at our high school. "Computers are a good hobby," she'd say with that condescending smile. "But you need a real career plan. Accounting, maybe. Something stable." The worst was when Greg would raid my room while I was at school, taking the notebooks where I jotted down code ideas and algorithm sketches. He'd bring them to dinner, reading passages aloud in a mocking voice. "Listen to this," he'd say, while our parents chuckled. "Adaptive neural interface with predictive response capabilities. What does that even mean? English, please, brainiac." I'd grab my notebook back while they laughed. "You wouldn't understand," I'd mutter. "Nobody would understand," Greg would retort. "Because it's nonsense." 8 years later, that nonsense was worth billions. The adaptive neural interface with predictive response capabilities was now Neuralink's flagship product, changing how humans interacted with technology. My phone chirped with an incoming email, pulling me from my reverie. My assistant had sent the morning briefing. Among the usual updates was a note about my family. They had confirmed the dinner reservation for tonight, and, as instructed, Eliza had arranged for a private dining room with recording capabilities. In my world, every meeting was documented, particularly those with potential legal implications. Below that was an email from my agent about international rights for my upcoming book on neural technology. The advance alone was more than my father had earned in his best year. How things had changed. Yet as I prepared for my morning workout in the suite's private gym, I remembered the most painful change of all, the day I discovered I wouldn't be going to MIT after all. I'd been accepted with a partial scholarship that would cover about 40% of the costs. The rest was supposed to come from the college fund my parents had started when I was born, or so they'd always told me. "Your education is our priority," they'd said repeatedly. But apparently, Greg's need for a house in the right neighborhood with the right zip code had become a bigger priority. They hadn't even warned me. Just sat me down 3 weeks before orientation and informed me the money was gone. "It's already done, Alex," my father had said when I protested. "The closing was yesterday. Greg and Melanie need this house for the baby. You wouldn't want your future niece or nephew growing up in some cramped apartment, would you?" "But what about my future?" I'd asked. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," my mother had replied. "You can go to state like Greg did. Live at home, save money. It worked out fine for him." Except Greg had barely graduated, and only because Dad had made a donation to the business school, and I'd already declined my acceptance to state in favor of MIT. I increased the incline on the treadmill, pushing myself harder as the memories fueled my determination. By the time I'd finished my workout, showered, and dressed in another impeccably tailored suit, I had regained my equilibrium. Today wasn't about the past. It was about ensuring they could never affect my future again. After my morning meetings with the Singapore team, I found myself with a rare hour of unscheduled time. I sat at the desk in my suite and opened my laptop. Time to see exactly what I was dealing with. "Iris, run a comprehensive financial analysis on Richard Chen, Linda Chen, and Gregory Chen," I instructed my company's proprietary AI system. "Focus on current assets, liabilities, credit scores, and business ventures. Include any legal proceedings or financial irregularities." "Parameters set, Alex. Beginning search now," Iris responded in her smooth, almost human voice. While Iris worked, I sipped another espresso and considered what I already knew. Over the years, I'd occasionally checked public records out of curiosity. I knew Dad's construction company had struggled after the housing market crash. I knew Greg had launched at least 3 failed startups, each with increasingly desperate business models. What I didn't know was how bad things had gotten. "Analysis complete," Iris announced. "Would you like the summary or full report?" "Summary first." Richard Chen. Chen Construction filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 8 months ago. Restructuring has been unsuccessful. Current debts exceed assets by approximately $3.2 million. 3 pending lawsuits from investors alleging misappropriation of funds. Personal credit score, 540. Home is in pre-foreclosure status with 3 months of missed payments. I raised an eyebrow. Worse than I'd expected. Linda Chen. No independent financial profile. Jointly liable for all Richard Chen's debts. Social media analysis shows continued high-end retail purchasing despite financial situation, suggesting denial or deliberate misrepresentation of lifestyle. That sounded like Mom, always keeping up appearances. Gregory Chen. Recent startup Medisync failed to secure second-round funding after burning through initial $500,000 investment. Personal bankruptcy filed 4 months ago. Divorce proceedings initiated by Melanie Chen, citing financial irresponsibility and emotional abandonment. Current address: Richard and Linda Chen's residence. Appears to be unemployed since Medisync folded. So Greg's perfect life had imploded. The house they'd bought with my college fund was probably long gone. "Any connection between their financial troubles and my public profile?" I asked. Timing suggests correlation. Richard Chen's first significant business loan default occurred 1 month after your company's IPO was announced. Gregory Chen's most recent startup launched 1 week after your Time magazine cover, with investor materials that heavily implied but did not directly state a connection to Neuralink technologies. So they'd been trying to capitalize on my success from afar. Interesting. Show me Linda Chen's recent social media activity. My screen filled with my mother's social media posts, carefully curated images of charity events, garden club meetings, and family dinners. Each caption oozed with implications of wealthy contentment. Another beautiful evening supporting the Children's Hospital with my wonderful friends, #blessed, read one, showing her in a dress I recognized as at least 5 years old, strategically photographed to hide its dated style. Most telling were her posts about family. So proud of all my successful children. #proud mom, #family first. Accompanied by a photo of Greg at some business function years ago, carefully cropped to remove whatever date might have been visible. Not a single mention of me, though several of her friends had commented asking about your other son, the tech one. My mother's responses were masterpieces of evasion. We're all so busy with our successful lives. Family reunions are hard to schedule, #proud mom problems. I closed the social media feed, feeling a strange mix of vindication and disgust. Their lives were falling apart while they pretended otherwise, exactly as they'd taught Greg to do, and exactly what they'd tried to force me into as well. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unknown number, but local area code. Alexander Chen, I answered professionally. Alex, it's me, Taylor Westfield. God, it's been ages. I recognized the voice immediately. Taylor Westfield had been my closest friend in high school, until senior year, when he'd chosen popularity over loyalty and sided with my family during the college fund fallout. Last I'd heard, he'd gotten a job as a tech journalist. Taylor, I said neutrally, this is unexpected. I know. Look, I'm covering the Tech Future Conference for Digital Trends, and I saw your keynote yesterday. Absolutely mind-blowing stuff, man. I always knew you were smart, but this is next level. You always knew I was smart, I repeated flatly. Interesting perspective. I seem to recall you telling me I was wasting my potential on computer fantasies the last time we spoke. There was an awkward pause. Water under the bridge, right? Taylor laughed nervously. We were kids. Anyway, I'd love to do a feature on you, the local boy who made it big. I'm thinking a real human interest piece, you know? Your journey from humble beginnings to tech visionary. We could talk about your strong family foundation, the support system that nurtured your talent. I nearly laughed out loud at the audacity. Strong family foundation, support system? A feature, I said, my voice deliberately thoughtful. That could be interesting. Really? That's great! Taylor sounded relieved and excited. I'm thinking we could even get your family involved. Your parents must be so proud. I'm having dinner with my family tonight, I interrupted. Why don't you join us? Around 8 p.m. at Lumiere in the Grand Hyatt. At your family dinner? Wow, that would be amazing. Are you sure they wouldn't mind? I insist, I said. It would be illuminating for everyone involved. After setting the details with Taylor, I hung up and smiled to myself. Another piece on the chessboard, moving exactly where I wanted it. At noon, I met Marcus for lunch at Terroir, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign. Just a blue door in a brick wall. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. Mr. Chen, Mr. Washington, welcome back. Your regular table is ready. Marcus raised an eyebrow as we were led to a secluded corner with a view of both the street and the entire restaurant. Your regular table? You been holding out on me? I smiled. I invested in Terroir's expansion last year. Chef Laurent is a genius who needed capital, not a boss telling him how to cook. Once seated, Marcus leaned forward. So, how are you feeling about tonight's family reunion dinner? Prepared, I said, unfolding my napkin. Their finances are worse than I expected. Dad's business is circling the drain, Mom's living in denial, and Greg is divorced, bankrupt, and living with them again. Damn, Marcus winced. And they still have the nerve to show up asking for handouts? Desperation makes people bold, I replied. Also, I've added a complication to tonight's dinner. Taylor Westfield called this morning. Taylor from high school? The one who... The very same, I confirmed. He's a tech journalist now, wanting to write a heartwarming piece about my strong family foundation. I invited him to join us for dinner. Marcus nearly choked on his water. "You're bringing press to your family ambush? That's cold, man." "It's practical," I corrected. "Having a journalist present will force everyone to behave, at least initially. Plus, I want a neutral witness to whatever happens next." Our conversation paused as the waiter brought our drinks. When he left, Marcus fixed me with a serious look. "Speaking of witnesses, do you remember Ryan Miller?" My hand froze halfway to my glass. "Unfortunately." "Why?" Ryan had been part of our friend group in college until he betrayed my confidence in the worst way possible. I'd told him about the app I was developing, shared my excitement about a potential investor meeting. Instead of supporting me, he'd gone to my family. "I thought they should know you might not need their help soon," he'd said when I confronted him. "Your dad seemed really interested in your project." He'd had no idea that my father had immediately used that information to justify investing in Greg's business ventures instead. "Alex will be fine on his own," Dad had told Mom. "Ryan says he's about to get major funding." The major funding had been a modest $50,000 seed investment that barely covered development costs, not the life-changing millions my father had imagined. "Why are you bringing up Ryan?" I asked Marcus. "Because he's here in the city, and he's been asking about you." I looked around the restaurant instinctively, half expecting to see Ryan lurking nearby. "He's not here," Marcus assured me. "But he approached our VP of Communications yesterday after your keynote, claiming to be an old friend who wanted to reconnect. Said he always believed in your vision and has an exciting collaboration opportunity." "Of course he does," I said bitterly. "Where was this belief when I was sleeping on your floor and working 3 jobs to make rent?" "That's what I said, minus the sleeping on my floor part," Marcus replied. "He's persistent, though. Says he's been sending you messages for weeks." I nodded. "He has. I've been sending them straight to spam." Marcus was about to respond when his expression changed, eyes focusing on something behind me. "Don't turn around," he said quietly. "But Ryan just walked in, and he's with your brother." I kept my face neutral, taking a sip of my drink. "Interesting coincidence." "Not a chance," Marcus said. "They're scanning the restaurant like they're looking for someone. $10 says they're looking for you." "Then let's not make it easy for them," I replied, already signaling our waiter. "Is there a back exit we can use?" The waiter nodded discreetly. "Of course, Mr. Chen, through the kitchen if you don't mind. Chef Laurent would be honored to say hello anyway." 5 minutes later, Marcus and I were slipping through the kitchen, the sounds of sizzling pans and chef's commands covering our exit. Chef Laurent beamed as we passed, insisting we try his new truffle creation. Even in the midst of a strategic retreat, some opportunities were too good to pass up. As we exited into the alley behind the restaurant, Marcus looked at me. "That was close. Think it was a coincidence they showed up there?" I shook my head. "Not a chance. They're gathering intelligence, trying to find points of access to me before tonight. Ryan was always good at weaseling his way into situations." "What's the play here, Alex?" Marcus asked as we walked toward my waiting car. "I know you. You're not just going to have dinner with them and walk away. You've got something planned." I smiled slightly. "Let's just say that by the end of the week, my family and former friends will understand exactly what their actions cost. Not just me, but themselves." "Revenge?" Marcus asked, concern evident in his voice. "Justice," I corrected. "And closure. On my terms, not theirs." That afternoon, I had a board meeting at Neuralink's local offices. As I walked through the sleek headquarters with floor-to-ceiling windows and open collaborative spaces, employees nodded respectfully or waved from their workstations. This building, with its cutting-edge design and technology, stood as physical proof of what I'd built from nothing, after being left with nothing. I stepped into the elevator with Marcus, pressing the button for the top floor. As the doors were about to close, a hand shot between them, forcing them back open. "Hold the elevator, please!" Vivian Winters stepped in, then froze when she realized who was already inside. "Oh, Mr. Chen, Mr. Washington, I was just heading up for the board meeting." I nodded politely, but said nothing. Vivian Winters, founding partner of Altitude Ventures, had been one of the first investors I'd approached 5 years ago when seeking funding for Neuralink. Her response had been memorable. "Neural interfaces? Predictive algorithms?" She had laughed, not even bothering to hide her disdain. "This is juvenile fantasy, not a business plan. My advice? Get a real job, build some practical experience, and come back when you have an actual product, not science fiction dreams." Now her firm was desperately trying to buy into our latest funding round, having missed the opportunity that had made early investors billions. The elevator ride was silent and awkward. When we reached the top floor, Vivian tried again as we walked toward the boardroom. "Alex," she said, using my first name as if we were old friends, "I've been meaning to connect with you. That demonstration yesterday was extraordinary. The progress you've made is unprecedented." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "You know, I was just telling my partners last week how I always saw something special in you, right from our first meeting." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "Did you? Strange way to show it by telling me my idea was juvenile fantasy and suggesting I get a real job." Her face flushed. "Well, I was testing your resilience," she stammered. "That's part of our evaluation process. Seeing if founders can handle criticism. Clearly, you passed with flying colors." "How fortunate for me," I said, my voice cool. "If you'll excuse us, I need a moment with my COO before the meeting." I walked away, leaving her standing awkwardly in the hallway. Marcus waited until we were out of earshot before speaking. "That was interesting," he said. "She's on the list of potential investors for the Series E, isn't she?" "She was," I replied. "I think we'll remove Altitude Ventures from consideration." Marcus nodded. "Agreed. We only want investors who believed in us when it wasn't easy." As we entered the boardroom, I thought about how many people had dismissed me, mocked me, or betrayed me on my journey. Most of them didn't matter anymore. But family was different. Their betrayal cut deeper because it should have been impossible. Tonight I would begin the process of excising that wound once and for all. After the board meeting, where we unanimously approved a $500 million acquisition of a promising AI security startup, I returned to my hotel to prepare for the evening ahead. As the elevator doors opened to my penthouse floor, I immediately noticed something blocking my door, an enormous, ornate gift basket wrapped in cellophane and tied with a giant red bow. "Mr. Chen," my security detail said apologetically, "we've scanned it for any potential threats. It appears to be just a gift basket." "Who delivered it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "A man and woman claiming to be your parents," he replied. "They told the front desk they were delivering a surprise from your executive team. The desk called up to confirm, but you were out. I made the decision to accept it, but keep it out here until you returned." "Good call," I said, plucking the card from among the expensive chocolates, imported cheeses, and bottles of champagne. "To our visionary son. Your success is our family's success. Can't wait for dinner tonight to discuss exciting opportunities. Love, Mom and Dad." The presumption was breathtaking. Your success is our family's success. As if they had played any role whatsoever in what I'd built. "Please have this sent to the children's ward at the university hospital," I told my security guard, with an anonymous donation note. "Yes, sir." Inside my suite, I had just begun reviewing my notes for dinner when my phone rang. Greg's number. "Hello?" "Alex, it's Greg. Just checking in about tonight. Did you get the gift basket? Mom and Dad spent all morning putting it together. I doubted that very much. It was clearly professionally assembled, probably purchased at the hotel gift shop at an exorbitant markup. I received it, I said simply. Great, so we're all set for 8 o'clock, right? Mom and Dad are so excited to reconnect. His voice was unnaturally cheerful, with an undertone of nervousness. And I've been thinking, there might be some amazing synergies between your company and my new venture. I've got some concepts that would work perfectly with your neural interface technology. Of course he did. Greg had never had an original idea in his life, but he'd always been skilled at attaching himself to other people's success. I look forward to hearing about it, I said, keeping my voice pleasant while my eyes remained coldly calculating. Just to let you know, I've invited a journalist to join us, Taylor Westfield. He's doing a feature on my journey from local startup to industry leader. There was a pause. A journalist? At a family dinner? Greg sounded thrown off script. Is that necessary? I thought it would be efficient, I replied. Since we'll be discussing the past and reconnecting, as you put it, Taylor can get the full family perspective for his article. Right, Greg said slowly. That makes sense, I guess. I'll let Mom and Dad know. Perfect. See you at 8. I hung up, knowing they would now spend the next few hours frantically strategizing. Good. I wanted them off balance. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. All set for tonight. Lawyer confirmed everything's in place. Good luck, brother. I set down my phone and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd built my empire. 8 years ago, they had taken what little I had and cast me out. Tonight, they were coming to ask for a piece of what I'd built without them. They were about to learn that some debts can never be repaid, and some opportunities, once squandered, never return. I arrived at Lumiere exactly 30 minutes late. The decision was deliberate. I wanted them to sit and stew, checking their watches and growing increasingly anxious. Power moves were something my father had taught me through his constant domination tactics at family dinners. Tonight, I would show him I'd learned the lesson well. The restaurant manager rushed forward as I entered. Mr. Chen, we're honored to have you dining with us tonight. Your guests are already seated in the private room. Thank you, Antoine, I replied, handing my coat to the attendant. I'd chosen my attire with meticulous care, a custom Brioni suit in charcoal gray with subtle blue accents that had been hand-tailored in Milan last month. The watch on my wrist was a limited edition Patek Philippe that cost more than my father's monthly mortgage payment. Every detail of my appearance had been calculated to silently communicate what they had missed out on by discarding me. As I approached the private dining room, I could see them through the partially frosted glass. My father repeatedly checking his phone, my mother nervously reapplying lipstick, and Greg drumming his fingers on the table. Taylor sat awkwardly among them, already taking notes. I paused at the door, taking a deep breath. Then I entered. Sorry I'm late, I said, not offering any excuse. An acquisition call ran long. My mother jumped to her feet immediately. Alex, darling, we were getting worried. She attempted to embrace me, but I smoothly sidestepped her, extending my hand to Taylor instead. Taylor, thank you for joining us on such short notice. My pleasure, he replied, standing to shake my hand. This is an incredible opportunity. The whole local boy makes good angle with the family perspective is golden. My father stood, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Son, you look well. Thank you, I said simply, taking the remaining seat at the head of the table. We ordered champagne, Greg said, gesturing to the expensive bottle chilling in an ice bucket. Dom Perignon, to celebrate the reunion. I nodded, but didn't comment on the champagne that they definitely couldn't afford. The restaurant owner, Michel, appeared personally at this moment. Mr. Chen, What an honor to have you dining with us tonight." He beamed at me. "I must thank you again for your early investment in our expansion. We would never have been able to open our Tokyo location without your support." My family exchanged glances at this revelation that I was an investor in this exclusive restaurant. "Michelle, the pleasure was all mine," I replied warmly. "Your vision was compelling, and I'm happy to have played a small role in bringing it to life." "Nothing small about it," Michelle laughed. "You were our angel when no one else would take the risk." He turned to my family. "You must be so proud of your son. Such vision, such generosity." My father seized the opportunity. "Absolutely. We always knew Alex would do extraordinary things. Even as a boy, he showed such promise. We supported his interest in computers from the very beginning." I nearly laughed at the blatant rewriting of history, but kept my expression neutral as Michelle nodded approvingly. "I've taken the liberty of preparing a special tasting menu for you and your guests tonight," Michelle continued. "On the house, of course." "That's very kind, but unnecessary," I replied. "Please charge the full amount to my account, I insist." "As you wish." Michelle bowed slightly. "The first course will be out momentarily." As he departed, my mother leaned forward eagerly. "Alex, darling, you must tell us everything. These past 8 years. We've missed so much of your life." "Have you?" I asked mildly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Taylor, ever the journalist, jumped in. "That's actually a perfect segue into what I'd like to explore in my article. The family foundation behind the tech visionary. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Chen, what was Alex like as a child? How did you nurture his obvious talents?" My father straightened, slipping into what I recognized as his public persona, the successful businessman, the family man. "We always encouraged Alex's interests," he claimed smoothly. "When he showed an aptitude for computers, we made sure he had the tools he needed. I remember buying him his first programming book when he was just 8 years old. The book had actually been a gift from my science teacher. My father had complained about it, filling my head with useless information. And we always knew he was special," my mother added, reaching across to pat my hand. I subtly moved my hand away, pretending to adjust my napkin. So focused, so brilliant. I used to tell everyone, "My Alex is going to change the world someday." What she had actually said was, "Alex needs to get his head out of the clouds before he ends up unemployable." I remained silent, sipping my water and watching them construct an elaborate fiction of supportive parenting. Their lies flowed smoothly, obviously rehearsed. Greg occasionally chimed in with anecdotes about our competitive but close relationship, conveniently omitting how he'd mocked my interests and sabotaged my projects whenever possible. Taylor scribbled notes enthusiastically. "This is great material. And when did you first realize that Alex's interest in neural interfaces might become something revolutionary?" My father barely hesitated. "I remember the night he explained his core algorithm concept to me. It was, 2015? He mapped it all out. And even though the technical details were beyond me, I could see the passion, the vision. I told him right then, 'Son, you're onto something world-changing here.' Bitter son." What he'd actually said in 2015, when I'd tried to explain my concept, was, "For God's sake, Alex, stop babbling about this computer nonsense and get a real job." I continued my silence, noting how my mother's eyes darted nervously to nearby tables where other diners were beginning to recognize me. The whispers and pointing had begun. I was, after all, one of the most recognizable tech figures in the world now. And this was exactly the kind of upscale restaurant frequented by people who followed business news. The first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche of seared scallop with citrus foam. As we ate, Greg leaned forward. "Remember how I used to help you debug your early programs, Alex?" he asked loudly, clearly for Taylor's benefit. Those late nights working together in your room. I always said you had incredible talent." I finally broke my silence. "Did you?" I asked pleasantly. "I must have forgotten that." Greg's smile faltered slightly. "Well, you were always so focused, in your own world, you know." "Interesting," I said. "I seem to recall you reading my journal entries aloud at dinner for everyone's amusement. Was that part of your help?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Taylor's pen paused over his notepad, his expression shifting as he sensed the undercurrent of tension. My mother laughed nervously. "Boys will be boys. Siblings always tease each other. It's part of growing up." I smiled enigmatically and raised my glass. "To family," I said, "and to accurate memories." They hesitantly clinked glasses with me, uncertainty clouding their features. For the rest of the meal, I let them talk, nodding at appropriate moments, watching them grow increasingly confident as I failed to contradict their revisionist family history. By the time dessert arrived, a complex chocolate creation with gold leaf, my father was fully committed to the narrative that he had been my greatest champion and earliest supporter. As we finished our dessert, Taylor excused himself to take a call, perfectly on cue. I'd arranged for my PR director to contact him with an urgent question about the article. Once he was out of earshot, my father leaned forward, his expression shifting from jovial reminiscence to serious business. "Alex, I wanted to talk to you about an opportunity," he began, his voice lowered despite the privacy of our room. "A family opportunity." "I'm listening," I replied, signaling the waiter for coffee. My father cleared his throat. "As you may have heard, the construction industry has been challenging lately. Chen Construction is facing some temporary cash flow issues." "I've read about that," I said mildly. His eyebrows rose slightly in surprise, but he continued, "Well, those news reports greatly exaggerate the situation. We're positioned for a tremendous comeback. The fundamentals of the business are sound." "The fundamentals," I repeated, adding nothing. "Exactly." He nodded, encouraged by what he perceived as interest. "We've got several major projects lined up that will be incredibly profitable. The West Side development alone could generate 8-figure returns." "But," I prompted. "But we need bridge capital," he admitted, "just to tide us over until these projects materialize. The banks have become unreasonably cautious since the last recession." "How much bridge capital are we discussing?" I asked, my voice casual as I stirred my coffee. My father and Greg exchanged glances. "Well," my father said carefully, "we've calculated that $5 million would cover immediate needs and position us perfectly for the upcoming opportunities." I nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And what about your startup, Greg? What was it called again?" "Neuratech," Greg replied eagerly, leaning forward. "It's a medical diagnostic platform using artificial intelligence, completely different from what you're doing," he added hastily. "No competition at all." "And its current status?" I asked. "Well, we had a successful angel round," he said, the lie evident in his shifting gaze. "But the Series A has been slower than anticipated. Investors are being overly cautious right now." "How much are you seeking?" $3 million would fully fund us through product completion and initial market entry," he replied promptly. "The potential return is enormous. We're looking at $1 billion valuation within 3 years. I made a show of considering this. So, a total of $8 million between the two ventures." "It would stay all in the family," my mother interjected. "Rather than funding strangers, you'd be helping the people who have always supported you." I nearly laughed at the audacity, but maintained my composure. "I'd need to see business plans, financial projections, current debt loads, and existing investor agreements," I said, as if seriously considering their proposals. My father brightened visibly, Of course. We've prepared comprehensive packets. He reached down for his briefcase and produced 2 folders, sliding them across the table to me. Everything you need to see the potential is right here. I opened Greg's folder first, scanning the glossy presentation with its vague promises and suspiciously optimistic projections. The team page showed Greg as CEO, my father as chairman, and several impressive-sounding advisors who, I suspected, had no idea their names were being used. "This looks thorough," I said, closing the folder. "Let me have my financial team review these materials. Why don't we meet next week to discuss further? Say Wednesday at 2 p.m. at Neuralink headquarters?" "Wednesday works perfectly," my father said, unable to hide his excitement. "Your mother and I are staying in town until Friday anyway." "Excellent," I replied. "I'll have my assistant contact you with the details." As if on cue, Taylor returned, apologizing for the interruption. We wrapped up the evening shortly after, my family visibly pleased with how things had gone. As we left the restaurant, several paparazzi were waiting outside, tipped off by my PR team, though my family didn't need to know that. "Mr. Chen, over here! Alex, a picture with your family. Is this a business dinner or family reunion?" My family immediately straightened their postures, moving closer to me for the photos. My mother touched her hair, my father put on his most successful smile, and Greg stepped directly to my side, all of them basking in the reflected fame. I allowed a few photos, maintaining a neutral expression while they beamed with premature triumph. They thought they'd succeeded, that I was going to save them from their financial ruin, that I believed their rewritten history, that all was forgiven and forgotten. They had no idea what Wednesday would bring. The next morning, I met with Jessica Patel, my chief legal counsel, in my hotel suite. She'd flown in overnight specifically for this meeting. "Morning, Alex," she said, accepting the coffee I offered. "I reviewed the materials you sent over. Your family's businesses are in worse shape than they're admitting." "I expected as much," I replied, sitting across from her. "What's the real damage?" Jessica opened her laptop. "Your father's construction company has defaulted on loans totaling nearly $4 million. There are 3 pending lawsuits from investors alleging he misrepresented project timelines and diverted funds. The West Side development he's touting doesn't even have final permits approved. The environmental impact study failed initially. And Greg's startup barely exists," she said bluntly. "They have a 1-page website, no patent applications, no actual product beyond some mock-ups, and a very angry initial investor who put in $50,000 and has been trying to get financial statements for 6 months." I nodded, having anticipated most of this. "So if I were to invest $8 million as they're requesting..." "You'd be throwing it into a black hole," Jessica finished. "Best case scenario, they'd pay off some creditors and limp along a bit longer before failing. Worst case, you could be drawn into their legal issues if it appeared you were helping them avoid creditor obligations." "Perfect," I said, surprising her. "Perfect? Alex, I just told you investing in them would be financial suicide." "I have no intention of giving them a penny," I clarified, "but I do want this all documented clearly for Wednesday's meeting." Understanding dawned on her face. "You're going to expose their situation publicly." "Not publicly," I corrected. "Just in front of enough witnesses to ensure they understand the reality of our relationship going forward. I don't want revenge. I just want them to experience exactly what they put me through, but with an important lesson at the end." I outlined my plan to her, watching her expression shift from concern to understanding and finally to professional appreciation for the elegance of the approach. "It's clean," she admitted. "No actual harm done to them, just illumination. I'll have everything prepared by Wednesday." She paused. "There's one more thing you should know. A respected business reporter from the Wall Street Journal reached out yesterday, asking for an interview about family businesses and tech innovation. Apparently, she heard you were having a family reunion of sorts. Taylor works fast, I mused. What's her name? Diana Kim, Harvard MBA, focuses on ethical business practices and governance structures. No nonsense, highly respected. Perfect, I said. Invite her to Wednesday's meeting. Tell her we're doing a profile on investment criteria for family businesses versus traditional startups. She doesn't need to know the full background yet. After Jessica left to make arrangements, I contacted my PR team to strategically time a major company announcement for Wednesday afternoon. Then, unable to resist, I drove to my old neighborhood. The streets looked smaller than I remembered, the houses more worn. I parked a block away from my childhood home and walked the rest of the distance, the scent of rain-soaked asphalt bringing back memories of the night I'd left. It had been raining then, too, a cold drizzle that soaked through my clothes as I walked away with nothing but a backpack containing my laptop and a few personal items. The house looked shabby now, the paint peeling in places, the garden overgrown. Through the front windows, I could see movement, my parents going about their day, unaware their prodigal son was watching. The for sale sign in the yard confirmed what Jessica had told me about their financial situation. According to county records, the house was now worth approximately $450,000, less than what I'd spent on office furniture for one floor of Neuralink's headquarters, less than the signing bonus I'd given to a promising engineer last month, less than my company earned in interest every hour. I stood there for a few minutes, expecting to feel something: anger, resentment, sadness. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if observing strangers through a window into the past. These people had shaped my early years, but they hadn't defined my future. Their rejection had been painful, but ultimately liberating. As I walked back to my car, I realized I wasn't seeking revenge after all. I was seeking closure, the final cutting of ties that would free me from the last lingering effects of their betrayal. Wednesday couldn't come soon enough. Wednesday arrived clear and crisp. I spent the morning in back-to-back meetings before breaking for lunch with Marcus. "Everything set for this afternoon?" he asked as we ate in my private office. "All arranged," I confirmed. "Jessica has the financial analysis prepared. Diana Kim from the Journal will be there, and the conference room cameras are recording for documentation purposes." "And you're sure about this?" Marcus pressed. "Once you do this, there's no going back to any kind of normal family relationship." I gave him a look. There hasn't been a normal family relationship since they spent my college fund on Greg's house and threw me out. Today just makes it official. At 1:45, Eliza informed me that my family had arrived. "They're 15 minutes early," she noted. "All three dressed very formally. Your father has a presentation binder with him." "Perfect," I said. "Show them to conference room A and offer them refreshments. Let them wait until 2:05, then bring them to the executive boardroom instead." A small power move, but effective. Let them prepare in one room, then change the venue at the last minute. It would throw off their rehearsed approach. At precisely 2:05, I entered the executive boardroom where my family now waited, looking impressed by the wall of windows overlooking the city and the massive table of polished walnut. They had positioned themselves on one side, leaving the head of the table conspicuously empty for me. "Alex," my mother stood, beaming. "This building is magnificent. You've done so well for yourself." "Thank you," I said, remaining standing. "We'll be joined shortly by my financial team and a journalist from the Wall Street Journal who's doing a feature on investment criteria." "A journalist?" My father frowned. "I thought this was a private family business discussion." "Miss Kim is writing about how tech companies evaluate investment opportunities, including family businesses," I explained smoothly. "Since we're discussing potential investments, it seemed relevant." Before he could object further, the door opened. Jessica entered, followed by our CFO, Robert Chen, no relation, our head of investments, Sarah Williams, and Diana Kim from the Wall Street Journal. "Sorry we're late," Jessica said, though they were precisely on time. The quarterly projections meeting ran long. I made brief introductions, watching my family's faces as they realized they were facing a full financial team plus a prominent journalist, not just their supposedly sentimental son with an open checkbook. "Well," my father said, recovering quickly, "this is quite a welcoming committee. We're prepared to discuss the opportunity in detail." He opened his binder and began distributing copies of what appeared to be an updated presentation. "Before we get to that," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table, "I've asked my team to conduct a preliminary analysis of both business proposals based on the materials you provided Monday night." I nodded to Robert, who connected his laptop to the room's display system. A detailed financial analysis appeared on the wall screen. "As you can see," Robert began in his precise, dispassionate voice, "we've conducted a thorough evaluation of Chen Construction's current financial position, existing obligations, and projected opportunities." What followed was a methodical dismantling of my father's business. Robert detailed the company's mounting debt, the 3 pending lawsuits from investors alleging fraud, and the tax liens that my father had somehow forgotten to mention at dinner. "The West Side development referenced as a primary revenue generator," Robert continued, "has failed environmental impact assessment twice and is unlikely to receive permitting approval within the projected time frame, if at all." My father's face had gone from confident to ashen. "These figures are taken out of context," he protested. "If you'd let me explain, Sarah spoke next, shifting the presentation to an analysis of Neura Tech, Greg's supposed startup. "Moving to the second investment opportunity," she said, "our due diligence revealed several concerns. First, Neuratech has no patented technology, no functional prototype, and no technical team beyond Mr. Gregory Chen, whose background shows no relevant experience in medical technology or artificial intelligence." Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We're in early development stages," he mumbled. "Additionally," Sarah continued relentlessly, "the sole investor to date has filed a complaint with the State Securities Board alleging misrepresentation of the company's status and capabilities." Diana Kim was taking detailed notes, her expression professional, but clearly interested in the unfolding drama. "Based on our standard investment criteria," Jessica concluded, "neither of these opportunities meets even our minimum threshold for consideration. The risk profiles are exceptionally high. The governance structures are concerning, and there are significant legal and financial red flags that would make these irresponsible uses of shareholder capital." Silence fell across the boardroom. My father's face contorted with anger and embarrassment. My mother looked like she might faint. Greg stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "This is outrageous," my father finally sputtered. "Alex, are you really going to let these people talk about your family's businesses this way, after everything we've done for you?" The moment had arrived. I leaned forward slightly. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, my voice calm. "Like throwing me out of the house when I was 18? Like taking my college fund, money that had been promised to me my entire life, and using it to buy Greg a house without warning me until 3 weeks before I was supposed to start at MIT?" Diana Kim's pen paused above her notepad, her eyes widening slightly. "That was a family decision," my mother said weakly. "Greg needed the house for his new family. We thought you'd understand." "A family decision that didn't include me," I pointed out, "and that left me homeless and unable to attend the university I'd worked for years to get into." "You were always resourceful," my father said defensively. "We knew you'd figure something out." "Yes, I figured something out," I agreed. I slept on my friend Marcus's floor for 6 months. I worked 3 jobs while coding at night. I built a company from nothing because I had nothing. No support, no safety net, no family to fall back on. I paused, letting my words sink in. Now, 8 years later, when that company is worth billions, suddenly you reappear with business proposals and revisionist histories about how supportive you always were. People make mistakes, my mother pleaded. We're still your parents. Yes, you made mistakes, I agreed. And now you have the opportunity to learn from them, just as I had to learn from mine. I slid a folder across the table. I am prepared to offer you this. My father snatched it up eagerly, clearly expecting a check, despite everything. His face fell as he read the contents. What is this? Financial literacy classes, career counseling, a modest monthly stipend? His voice rose incredulously. This is insulting. No, Dad. Insulting is telling your son his dreams are worthless, then crawling back when those dreams make him successful, expecting him to save you from your own bad decisions. I stood, signaling the end of the meeting. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, it's withdrawn permanently. The monthly stipend is conditional upon attendance at the financial literacy classes and career counseling sessions. It's enough to cover basic living expenses while you rebuild your lives on a sounder foundation. You can't do this, Greg said, finally finding his voice. We're family. You owe us? I owe you? I interrupted, my voice still calm, but with an edge now. I owe you what, exactly? For reading my journals aloud at dinner? For mocking my computer obsession? For taking my college fund for your house? He fell silent, unable to answer. Diana Kim approached me as my family gathered their things in stunned silence. Mr. Chen, would you have time for a few follow-up questions from my article? This perspective on investment criteria is fascinating. Of course, I replied, loud enough for my family to hear. And I'd be happy to comment on Neuralink's approach to ethical investing, including our new education initiative being announced this afternoon. As my family shuffled toward the door, I caught my father looking back at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. For the first time in 8 years, he was seeing me clearly, not as the son he could manipulate, but as the man who had outgrown his power. Alex, he said, one last attempt. You're making a terrible mistake. When you cool down and think about this. I've had 8 years to cool down and think about this, I replied evenly. This isn't an emotional decision. It's a business one. Your proposals don't meet my investment criteria, and our past relationship doesn't merit special consideration. In fact, it would suggest even greater caution is warranted. His face reddened, but before he could respond, security appeared to escort them out. I had arranged this carefully, not to humiliate them, but to ensure the meeting ended cleanly, without the possibility of a scene. As the door closed behind them, Diana Kim turned to me. That was unexpected, she said carefully. Would you be willing to share more about how you separate family relationships from business decisions? I believe in merit-based assessment, I replied, seamlessly transitioning to the narrative I wanted in her article. Whether family, friend, or stranger, the same criteria should apply. Anything else undermines true entrepreneurship and reinforces privilege over innovation. She nodded, writing rapidly. And the education initiative you mentioned? We're announcing it this afternoon, I said. A $50 million scholarship fund for underprivileged students interested in tech careers. Students who, like me, may not have family financial support for education. Perfect timing, perfect narrative, perfect closure. The first phase of my plan was complete. The fallout was swift and devastating. For them, not me. Diana Kim's article appeared in the Wall Street Journal 2 days later. Merit over nepotism: how next-gen tech leaders are revolutionizing investment criteria. It was a thoughtful piece on how younger entrepreneurs were establishing more objective standards for funding decisions, refusing to be swayed by personal connections or emotional appeals. The article mentioned unnamed family members seeking preferential investment terms being redirected to standard channels, like any other applicant. It didn't name my family directly, but anyone who knew the situation would recognize it immediately. On the same day, Neuralink announced the $50 million scholarship fund for underprivileged students, with me citing my own experience of having no financial support for education as the inspiration. The press loved it, a billionaire using his success to create opportunities for others facing similar challenges. The calls and messages started within hours. My mother left tearful voicemails begging me to stop this public humiliation. My father alternated between angry tirades and awkward apologies. Greg sent long texts explaining how he'd always supported me in his heart and had been too young to understand what was happening when my college fund was taken. He was 3 years older than me. The most interesting contact came 3 days after the meeting. An unknown number, but the caller ID showed Melanie Chen, Greg's estranged wife. "Alex? It's Melanie. We've never really talked, but I wanted to reach out." "What can I do for you, Melanie?" I asked, curious despite myself. "I want you to know I had no idea about your college fund," she said immediately. "Greg told me his parents had saved up for the house down payment. I only learned the truth during our divorce proceedings last year. I appreciate you telling me that," I said, meaning it. "There's more," she continued. "Greg and your parents, they've been planning this approach to you for over a year, ever since your company went public. They have a whole strategy. Get back into your life, secure investment, then leverage your name for their businesses." "I'm not surprised," I replied. "But why are you telling me this?" "Because it's wrong," she said simply. "And because Greg is still trying to manipulate me too, using our daughter as leverage. I thought maybe we could help each other." "What did you have in mind?" "I have emails, text messages, recorded conversations where they discuss their plans. Greg doesn't know I kept them. I'll share everything with you if you'll help me secure full custody of Lily. Your brother is not a good influence, and I don't want my daughter growing up thinking his behavior is acceptable." "An interesting proposition. I won't get directly involved in your custody battle," I told her. "But I can connect you with the best family law attorney in the state and cover the legal fees, in exchange for copies of everything you have." "Deal," she said without hesitation. Later that day, I received a folder of screenshots, recordings, and emails that confirmed exactly what I'd suspected. Their reunion had been calculated from the start, with detailed discussions about how to approach me, what buttons to push, and how much to ask for initially. Most damning was a recorded conversation between Greg and my father. "He'll give us the money," my father had said. "He needs to maintain his public image now. A billionaire can't be seen abandoning his family." "What if he asks about the college fund?" Greg had asked. "We tell him it was a difficult family decision that we all regret now. Blame it on the recession, financial pressure, whatever. The important thing is to focus on the future, not the past." I forwarded the recording to Greg without comment, knowing it would create immediate discord within their united front. According to Melanie, it did exactly that. Greg accused our father of setting him up as the fall guy, our mother took Dad's side, and the tenuous alliance fractured. A week after the boardroom meeting, a letter arrived, handwritten on my mother's monogrammed stationery, the envelope stained with what appeared to be tears. I didn't open it. Instead, I placed it in a file folder labeled Documentation and turned my attention to the scholarship program launch. The past had delivered its lessons. Now I was building something that would help others avoid the path I'd been forced to take. They had wanted money. Instead, they'd received truth. Far more valuable, though they couldn't see it yet. And I was just getting started.